Welcome to today's webinar titled Invoice Capture, Why Bother? A Controller's View. My name is Libby Nickel, and I'm a regional manager here at ACOM Solutions. As you may have noticed, all attendees have been muted, but that definitely doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. So should you have any questions, please type them in the GoToMeeting panel on the right-hand side, and we will answer all questions at the end of the presentation if the time allows for it. Our presenter today is Steve Snider, who has been with ACOM since 1993. Steve received his bachelor's degree in business administration with an emphasis in accounting, and then went to work for a company called Petrolane for 12 years. Now, Steve manages all financial aspects of the company's operations. So, without further ado, I will pass it over to Steve.
Good morning or good afternoon to all, depending on where you're located at. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend this presentation. Before we get started, there's a short poll on your screen. If you could answer those questions, we'd appreciate it. And while you're doing that, I just wanted to give the results of a poll that you took when you signed up regarding the amount of invoices that you process each month. About 50% of the people are from the 0 to 1,000 range each month, and the 50% are from 1,000 and over. But a full 70% are in the 0 to 2,000 area, which for ACOM, we're in the 500 to 1,000, so any benefits we talk about today will be greatly enhanced with the more invoices that you do.
Okay, Steve, it looks like the majority of people have voted, so I'm going to go ahead and share the results. And it looks as though the majority of the attendees are not currently capturing any documents electronically at this time. 74% said no electronic capture at present time, and 17% said they're using email, fax, or EDI, or possibly scanners to save documents to a network drive.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and hide those results, and you can continue on.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Libby. The presentation today is electronic invoice capture, and the question is, why bother? We ourselves found that electronic invoice capture is a very useful tool in the accounting arsenal. Some of the things that we will be discussing today are the issues and consequences of the traditional paper invoice process, the effects of the invoice capture technology when specifically applied to the AP process, the additional and unanticipated benefits we found during our audit, and how this affected my key responsibilities as controller for ACOM Solutions. Just to give you some idea of what we were looking at when we started, ACOM Solutions is a software developer. We've been in business for over 27 years. Along with software sales, we also handle a variety of other products such as laser printers, toners, checks, and office equipment. We have about 100 employees throughout the United States. We have multiple offices, which means multiple people that will not only be handling the invoice but also required to approve them. And our centralized office is here in Southern California in Long Beach. To look at how we first started, we need to look at how the workflow of the inbound invoices would occur. And you have invoices of two types, the POs as well as non-PO invoices. Currently, we have 3 offices in the eastern part of the United States, one in Indiana, one in Ohio, and one in Georgia. And again, our main office has the centralized responsibilities for the recording and payment of invoices is out here in Southern California in Long Beach. Invoices will come into any of the 4 offices, but for this we'll talk about the remote offices in the other states. You're talking about 3 offices that are 3 hours time difference from our Southern California office, as well as anywhere up to 3,000 miles away. When the invoices do come into these offices, they are given to the appropriate person to approve, as well as to forward on to Long Beach for payment and payment processing and then storage. So you can see that this can cause delays. It can also cause postage expenses, because when those invoices come in, we normally have one weekly overnight package to come out here. If anything needs to be handled specially, that's going to require additional postage expense. Once the invoices are received in Long Beach, they are then given to the accounts payable department, who then will process this for payment. It will go into a temporary file until selected for payment. Once the invoices have been selected for payment and are paid, then any applicable documentation such as a check stub, ACH notification, or wire transfer documentation will be applied to any of the documentation that comes along with that invoice, and then will be given to a file clerk for storage in either a file cabinet or some other type of storage vehicle. As you can see, this can lend itself to some delays, some potential conflicts, and some issues that come up when dealing with regional offices. A couple cases in point would be, number one, our phone invoices. For example, in our Duluth office, the net ops person is responsible for reviewing all communication invoices to make sure that we're paying for services that we had contracted for, as well as whether or not the appropriate lines are coming in. So this invoice can come in. It needs to be approved by that person. If that person is out on vacation or is out on business or just is busy in his normal day and some emergencies come up, it can delay the shipment here to Long Beach. Again, since if there are just one package coming from each of the district offices, then if this invoice would come in on a Tuesday but the package was sent out on Monday, it would have to sit another week. What we were finding was many times we would receive the invoice along with the disconnect notice in the same package, which meant that we then had to, here in Long Beach, pay that invoice as soon as possible and possibly overnight it, again, incurring some extra expenses that we weren't really anticipating. Another case in point is the utility bill. Facility manager gets the utility bill and is responsible to check it over to make sure that all contracted services are within the parameters that we had discussed. And then they too have to file it and send it over here to Long Beach. And this can go for anything, as well as advertising invoices, office supplies, things of a non-PO nature that need to get out on a timely basis. So what are the consequences of the traditional paper invoice process? Well, first and foremost is you really have no visibility into the outstanding liabilities as a controller. You don't know who you have to pay, when you have to pay it, or even how much. And this can cause problems. You're basically working in the dark. It can cause late fees, finance charges, or like I say, even disconnect notices to be sent out. In our case, because we deal with items such as check stock or hard items such as toners or as laser printers, we are able to take discounts for prompt payment. Now this can be anywhere from a week to 15 days, but you can see where if invoices are held at any point in the workflow process, you might not be able to take these discounts, and vendors are usually very reticent to allow these discounts if you're continually late and ask to still be able to take the discount. And lastly, delayed shipments. If you've already contracted for a large shipment, but you're limited by a credit limit of how much you can order at any point in time, and another order is placed and you have not seen the other invoice that was to pay for an earlier shipment, a vendor could potentially delay your shipment or hold it, put you on credit terms of COD, or request some type of deposit paid before that shipment is released. So what do we have then? We had a problem that we needed to address. And one of the things we started looking at in this day and age was the electronic invoice capture. Now we knew that there was a variety of systems available in the marketplace out there that, although comprehensive, they were neither practical nor affordable for ACOM. We did look at a variety of them. Some of them were very nice, very complex. went into probably far too much detail than we had, but one of the biggest things was affordability. Luckily, as a controller for a software company, I had the luxury of working with people that were keenly aware of the technology out there, were able to advise me on how things should be done. I could discuss with them the workflow, and then they were able to put together a system that would meet our requirements. And while we were aware of all the technology out there, the biggest and best requirement was that it had to be practical, affordable, easy to use, and that it was a system built for the mid-market. So when we started looking at how we would apply this technology. The first thing we looked at was scanning of invoices. With the scanning of invoices, we could get a full copy of the invoice, an electronic copy, and be able to read it and store it in a maximum efficient manner. We looked at optical character recognition, which is OCR, and that was going to allow us to pick up certain things on the invoice once we had set up specific parameters as to where certain key data fields were, and it would automatically pick it up during the scan. Lastly, was metadata. And metadata was very helpful in the fact that once you put in this key fields and key information, and it didn't have to be a lot, it would allow you to store that data and allow anyone to search on any number of different search variations that there could be, whether it be the vendor name, vendor number, invoice number, PO number, anything that was linked to that document or your search would come up. So if you had an invoice that had a PO number and you wanted to see shipping documentation as to how it was received, the whole history of the transaction would be there for you to see. So we started out using a scanning system. We put scanners in all 4 of the offices. The invoices would now come in. A person was assigned to scan that invoice in. The scanning of the invoice allowed for 2 things. One was the immediate routing for approval of that invoice. It would go to either 1, 2, or 3 people depending on what the approval chain was. Once approved, it would be then notify the accounting department that this invoice had been approved for inclusion into our accounts payable. What was nice was even though it might have gone out for approval, it was immediately put into the system in Long Beach so that I had access and visibility to that invoice to see what invoices were out there, if I had an issue with it, or if I needed to see the size of it, if it was going to cause us credit problems or whatever. I was at least able to see that. And then once it was approved, it of course was in the system and I was able to see it even more clearly. What this did was made it a real-time inclusion of the invoice into the system without having to wait for an overnight package to arrive with approved invoices. This is a sample of a scan of an invoice. Once it's into the system, you actually see the invoice. You can see all the detail on it. In most ERP screens, you're only going to see that certain information that's on there. You might not see the details, any notes that might have been written on the invoice, who actually approved it. So the scanning of the invoice is a very powerful tool. Next was OCR, the optical character recognition. What this allowed you to do was specify certain key fields and where they're located on an invoice so that once it's scanned, it's automatically updated by use of this tool. And it is a very valuable tool in that a certain vendor, while vendors might have different invoices, the same vendor will have everything in the same location. So if you have a large vendor that you do a lot of business with, this will save time. The final thing is metadata. With the metadata, you are able to put in, again, very key information that will allow searches based on that criteria. If you wanted to see a certain PO, you would not only get to see the PO request, the PO itself, the invoice, you'd be able to see any shipping documentation, receipt of goods, the payment information. So again, it's a very valuable tool that you're not only seeing the invoice, you're seeing any other documents linked to it by way of the metadata. So the moral of this story is that imaging is the key. It's the first step in AP automation, and it is one of the most critical parts. Again, as you can see through all of the workflows, that it is a very important tool to have this imaging in the system. Just kind of giving you a recap, we've all seen this, but you can see the actual invoice paper document flow does not lend itself to very readily getting updated into the system. You have a number of manual items that need to be done, whether they be invoices, notifications, whatever. You're storing things in a variety of different temporary files, but again, it is a very manual process. With the AP automation using the electronic invoice capture, you're able to get away from a number of these manual situations where the potential for a lost, a misplaced, or damaged invoice can happen almost on a daily basis. So overall, with the AP automation and the capture system, you've simplified things enormously, and you're really bringing yourself into the 21st century with the electronic availability that goes with it. When you capture any of the documents, whether they be invoices, POs, shipping documentations, you run it through a scanner. Once it's scanned, it automatically goes into the process manager. That process manager then takes over the duties of notifying the purchaser that the goods have been arrived. They receive an email or some type of electronic notification. The accounting department is then aware that there is an invoice in the system ready to be input or integrated into the ERP system. The purchasing manager or purchasing agent is automatically notified that this has been received, and they are then able to use that invoice and do the reconciliation between the PO as well as the invoice, seeing any shipping documentation that the warehouse might have sent, the receipt of goods, and it's all done electronically. And finally, then, once this is done, it all goes into the ERP system for saving and updating. But the biggest thing is the invoice is now, and the history of the transaction is now included in a safe and secure environment electronically. So what are the benefits of the electronic format? Well, I'll give you a couple cases in point. One, probably just like many of you, each month when we process the financials, we give our business managers access to, if not all of the PL statements, but we give them a portion of it that they're responsible for. In the past, what would happen would they would get this expense analysis where there's certain key expense items, and it would give them the detail that makes up that charge. So if they had a question regarding ABC Company for $3,000, they would have to call me, or they would have to call the accounting manager or some person on my staff, and that invoice and payment would have to be researched, it'd have to be pulled, and then we'd have to get back in touch with the manager requesting the information to give them that. Now with the electronic process, we give them a limited security level to go in for a limited view of the electronic invoice system. They can search for that, whether it be on the vendor number or the vendor name, the invoice number, and they themselves can look that up. And as you remember with the scan screen, they see the actual invoice there. They'll immediately know who approved this invoice, what it was for, and when it came about. So it's a very powerful tool, and it saved us a number of times and cut down on some of the manual steps. The picture here relates to our warehouse, and it's a very valid point in the sense that there were 4 people that used to handle paperwork or invoices or some type of documentation relating to the history of the transaction. In this case, taking a PO or purchase order type of purchase, you would have the purchasing agent who would create the PO. That PO would have to be either emailed or faxed or walked down to the warehouse so that the warehouse would have it. The purchasing agent would then put that in a temporary file and wait until the warehouse had received the product. Once they had received the product, any documentation they received, whether it be the bill of lading, shipping documentation, or their internal receipt of goods report showing what condition the goods were received in, if they were received in its totality or whether there was back-ordered items. Once they did that, they would then get all the documents together and have to bring them or get them in some fashion to the purchasing agent, who would then in turn have to go check wait for the invoice. Once the invoice came in, make sure everything matched. They would put everything together, and then they would give it to the accounts payable department for inclusion in a temporary file that it would sit there until the actual approval was given to pay it. Once payment was initiated, then you would have the invoice paid. Any appropriate payment information, such as a check stub or ACH notification, would have to be attached to this. And finally, it was given to a file clerk, who then had to go and file it away in a file cabinet. So with the new system, everything was really handled electronically. Once the PO person, purchasing agent, had created the PO, it was electronically updated. It allowed the warehouse to know that that PO was sitting there waiting to have something received against it. Once it was received, any documentation was then scanned in by the warehouse and uploaded to the system. The purchasing agent would be able to see that that had been done. They would wait till the invoice came in, match that up. Once it was done, he would scan the invoice. Then everything, again being linked together through metadata, would be uploaded, and the accounts payable department would be notified that was into the system. Once the invoice was chosen to be paid, again, any documentation that related to the payment, such as the check stub, would be associated with that metadata, and it was then in a secure, stored place. There was no need for a file clerk to have to go to file it anywhere. So you can see it's a very valuable tool in the sense that you're saving yourself and your staff a number of time. One of the things we found out that was pretty interesting is during the audit. Now, the audits can be handled either for the annual outside audits, say firms like ours, Wines & McClowery or Deloitte Touche, whomever, but also for sales and use tax auditors. Use tax auditors, and when they come in, are going to want to pull all invoices relating to any purchase you made to make sure that you not only paid sales tax, but that you also paid use tax. In this day and age, especially out here in California, states are really looking to find whatever monies they can, and these audits are going to become more and more the norm instead of an exception. For us, when they come in here, whether it be the use tax auditor or the outside auditor, we found that there were some additional and unanticipated benefits of this system, again, that we had not even thought about. We all know the process. Once an auditor comes in, they're looking for statistical samples, so depending on the number of invoices you have, they might pick a sample of, say, 10, 20%, and they're going to want to see that invoice and any backup documentation you have to it. You're going to have somebody pull those invoices or that documentation, give it to the auditors, sit there and work with them to explain it. Once the auditors are all done, they might want to take pictures of it for their files. They give it back, and now this has to be filed. Through this whole process, you're hoping that everything stays intact and nothing is lost or nothing is damaged or misplaced. Again, it's your staff that normally will have to go out there and pull these items, whether it's from boxes that you have sitting there or from a file cabinet. This is not a good use of their time when these people could be used doing something else. So what we found out was basically a time saver as well as a money saver. When the auditors come in, we give them, again, limited access with a security level that they can go in and view the invoices. So when they make their samples, instead of handing a list to the accounting manager and then her having to have her staff pull some documents, the auditors can now go in and call up an invoice based on the vendor number, vendor name, and again see the whole history of the transaction. There's no fear of documents having been lost or misplaced. They're able to actually see these invoices. If they want to take copies right from there or store them electronically for their files, they're able to do that. What does that mean? Well, basically, for us, the biggest thing was it cut anywhere from 2 to 3 days off the audit field work because, among other things, they were able to look at these things. They didn't have to wait for things to be pulled, to be looked at. If things were missing, people to try and scrounge them up wherever they could be. They were able to look at these quickly and with the security that they knew that all the documents would be there. It gave staff time who had been supporting these auditors the ability to go out and do other things, whether it be helping on special projects, doing reconciliations, or in our case, we were actually able to put one person on AR collections that normally at audit time we would have to use to support them. So the cost also, because you've cut down on the time, we all know the charges auditors now hit us with, but if you're able to slow that down or reduce it, you'll be a hero to the higher ups. In our case, we were able to keep our audit bill steady. Now, auditors normally will hit you with a 5 to 10% just because increase each year. That's just the way the business works. We were able to keep our audit costs a little bit below or at least stagnant for the last 3 years because of the fact that we were able to cut down on the time that they spent out here. And the last thing is, as with any auditor, internal controls and security are the biggest issues. If you can show to the auditor that you have a good, secure system for storing invoices and a routing and approval process that has very delineated approval processes and chains, and they're happy with that, you've gone a long way to getting an unqualified opinion. If you present them with invoices that are incomplete or documentation is missing, they're either going to have to pull an additional sample, or it could, in extreme cases, lead to a qualified opinion, and none of us want that. So, again, the biggest thing that I found out was the security and the internal controls was a very important factor. This not only helped us with our outside auditors, but also the internal auditors as well. So what are the summary of benefits that we can get from this? The first is you now have immediate visibility of invoices, whether it's been approved or not approved. The invoice is in the system, and as the controller, you can look at these invoices and know what you have to pay, who you have to pay, and when you have to pay them. Take advantage of any of the discounts that you might be able to. You can eliminate the cost of overnighting documents between regional offices, between vendors, and hopefully get things on a real-time basis. You can free up physical document storage space. Another case in point is here in our offices. We were able to free up 21 storage containers or file cabinets. What that meant was we were able to clean up our offices, but also take a room that we were using for file room and now use that to make 4 free and new offices that people could use instead of having to just have basically wasted space with documents in file cabinets. You can have fewer, and I would almost say you would have now no lost, damaged, or missing invoices due to the fact that they're being scanned at the point of entry and immediately put into the system. Any documentation that goes along with those invoices will be connected by use of the metadata and linked to those documents, and you won't have to worry about paper clips coming loose or staples that become undone, people misfiling one here, one there. Now everything is in a safe and secure environment. And you're able to increase your on-time payments. You can literally go down to the last minutes. We all try and stretch our payables as long as we can. But with this, you know exactly what you have and what you have to play with. You can make your on-time payments as far as discounts, making sure that you take it at the last day possible, but still able to receive the discount that is needed. So what effect did this have on my responsibilities? Well, the entire solution and the process all starts with the electronic capture of the invoices and any of the other related documents at the beginning of the process. some of the things that I noticed immediately were the better control of my cash flow. I was, again, able to see who I had to pay, when I had to pay them, and how much I had to pay. I was able now to feel free to hold certain payments at a point in time and pay others that needed to be paid. I was able to know that something wasn't sitting out there and basically waking up at night in a cold sweat wondering what big invoice was sitting in a regional office that I didn't know about. I was able to reallocate my staff to other duties, not only during the audit, but now during the normal day-to-day operations. For example, no longer is a file clerk needed. That person can now be used to do other duties, whether it be, again, calling on AR invoices or helping with special reconciliations or special projects. I, along with other business managers, now have the ability to review expenses and purchases at the click of a button. No longer do I need to send a person to pull a file or pull an invoice. I'm able here at the safety of my own desk be able to go into the system, click on that, and search under any parameter that I want, whether it be PO, whether it be vendor number, and see that invoice, who approved it, and what exactly it was for, and not have to worry that possibly one half of the documentation for that history transaction is lost somewhere. We were able to reduce our audit field work, and to us it was a big thing. I mean, this saved us a couple $1,000s or more because of the fact that we were able to show the auditors that we kept our invoices in a safe and secure environment, as well as allowing them to do the work that my staff would normally have to do of pulling, retrieving, and then also storing again those documents. And lastly, the increased internal controls and the security of the documentation. One of the things that the auditors are now very big on are your internal controls after everything that's happened. We're now able to show them, again, the approval process, the linking of the documents. Everything is there, and it will be stored basically forever in electronic format without any fear of the documents ever disappearing, being altered, one or two portions of the documents being taken care of. And again, the security of the documents. We're able to ensure that we, as long as any auditors that come in, will be able to see the full documentation, and that basically means that they will not be bothering me nor the accounting manager for any types of other documentation or bringing into the fact that potentially there's a problem here and they might not be getting the full and correct invoices that they needed to see. So overall, I would say I'm very, very happy with the electronic invoice capture. It's been a godsend to us, and we're very happy with the system it is. It's a very easy-to-use tool, very easy-to-implement tool. There was no large training that we had to do. Basically, anybody that can use a scanner and is somewhat confident with a computer can use this, and the benefits are all on the back end. So I appreciate your attendance today, and I really do thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Before we get to the questions, and just a reminder for any of you that do have questions, please type those in to the GoToWebinar panel over on the right-hand side, and we'll get to those momentarily. But before we do, Steve, if you could just progress to the next slide, I do want to point out the excellent resources that we have on the ACOM website. So feel free to browse to www.acom.com/AP resources for articles and additional information. And you can also sign up for future webinars that ACOM is hosting. At the end of the webinar, you will be prompted, to fill out a survey. Please do take a couple of minutes to fill this out. It really helps us in preparing for upcoming webinars. Okay, so at this time, we'll answer any questions that you all may have. Give me just 1 second here. Okay, the first question says, you mentioned that you are now scanning invoices when they come in at the remote locations. Who did you assign to do the scanning?
We decided to look at it and see who is the first person that would be effectively receiving the invoice. Since we're a small firm and a mid-sized firm, we do not have a mail room where all mail comes into. In all of our offices, there is a receptionist that receives all mail. They're responsible for the checks, for any of the invoices. So we decided to use that person, the receptionist, as the key person to input and scan. We put a scanner on their desk. They now, once they get the invoice, they immediately scan it in. So again, our thought was to use the first person who receives this invoice. The last thing we wanted to do was start sending them out around the building. So to answer your question, the receptionist is the person we use.
Okay. Let's go to the next question here. You mentioned capturing invoices and how that ties to automatic routing and approval. How is that handled, and what software are you using? Steve, if you'd like, I can go ahead and answer that question.
Okay, that'd be fine.
The solution that we use is called FastDoc for scanning the paper documents and capturing the metadata along with other information. That solution is integrated then with Easy Content Manager, which is the document management solution, which includes workflow capabilities as well. Both of these solutions, of course, are provided by ACOM, and at the end of the webinar, one of the questions in the survey is if you'd like to be contacted by a product expert, go ahead and tick the yes box, and we will contact you about these solutions. Okay, the next question is, can you tell us what documents are being stored as part of the whole transaction history, and how do you capture the other documents?
Again, we consider the history of the transaction basically from cradle to grave. So if there's some type of request, whether it be a PO request or an email, we start from that point and we progress on to, if there's a PO, the PO. If there is shipping documentation that comes in, again, whether it be the bill of lading, an internal document such as receipt of goods listing the condition of the product received, the invoice itself, any type of payment information, again, whether it be the check stub listing what was paid, when it was paid, the check number, as well as any ACH potential payments or wire transfer information. Basically anything that you can think that would normally go with that piece of paper or that transaction is now attached or in some way, shape, or form linked to that document. So whatever document they look at, whether it be the invoice or whether they search for the PO, they're going to have access to all that documentation. And basically we do it all through scanning. If the invoice, whether it be at the purchasing agent's desk to scan certain things, whether it be in the warehouse to scan the shipping documentations, whether it be the person up at the front desk, the receptionist who scans it. Wherever there is a potential that we looked at the workflow, we put a scanner on that desk, and that person is then responsible for scanning and uploading the document using the metadata.
Okay. The next question, how long did it take you to get the invoice capture solution up and running?
Well, the nice part about this is it took us a couple of weeks, but I'll break that down. Basically, the installation, it takes about 15 minutes. It's very, very straightforward. There is really no training. It's so easy to use and basically intuitive that our biggest thing that we took care of in 2 weeks was the actual workflow. You need to sit down, diagram out who you want to handle certain documents, how you want to handle them, where you want to go, what the approval chain is going to be. So really it was some of the setup that took the longest time. The actual implementation and installation took 15 minutes, and the training was next to nothing because it is so intuitive. Any person who can use a computer or a scanner is really readily able to use this. But I would suggest that first you sit down and really document what your workflow is and which people do you want to not only see the invoices, approve the invoices, or handle the invoices. You do that, you'll be set up and ready to go.
Thank you. Okay, in the interest of time, we'll stop there. For any questions that we didn't answer, we will respond to you by email after the webinar. We hope you got some valuable insight into invoice capture technology today. If you'd like to find out more about our invoice capture solution and what it can help you all do and how it can help you automate your AP process, please email us at sales@acom.com, or you can call us at the number provided there. And we'll have one of our product experts give you a demonstration and answer any questions that you have. Thank you all, and have a great day.